everybody, and welcome to the U.S. Center and our event, Building Climate Resilience with Indigenous Peoples and Indigenous Knowledge. It's our honor to introduce here to the podium the Acting Deputy Secretary at the U.S. Department of the Interior, Laura Daniel Davis.
Thank you. And thank you all for joining us here today, both in person and online for today's panel. I'm really thrilled to welcome everyone as we really dive into such an important conversation alongside our amazing panel here. For decades, advocates have called on us to embrace Indigenous knowledge with the intentionality and respect it deserves with regard to our decision-making as an important knowledge system that we simply can't address the climate challenge without. At the Department of the Interior, we are very lucky, very fortunate to be guided by the foresight and wisdom of our amazing leader, Secretary Deb Haaland, who has helped transform this call to action into true day-to-day work for us at the department. Since the start of the Biden-Harris administration, we have leveraged the influence, decision-making of the department to really chart a new course for climate action, and one that is deeply rooted in Indigenous knowledge that tribes have garnered over millennia. Indigenous knowledge is a deep understanding of our natural world and the ecosystems that we all depend on. It's been developed over thousands of years, and it's passed down from one generation to the next. Beyond historic knowledge, it really reflects the lived experience of Indigenous peoples that can be applied really across disciplines, across the Department of the Interior and really everywhere in government and beyond. Last year at the department, we announced the publication of a suite of new policies. These are our departmental manuals. Sounds boring, but it is what it says. It tells folks how to operationalize at the department. And we formalized and solidified the department's priorities and our frameworks for climate action. And within these new policies, we formalized for the very first time the inclusion of Indigenous knowledge in our decision-making, our scientific research as a core value. We affirmed a really simple fact, again, for the first time, that Indigenous knowledge simply must play a guiding role for us in the decision-making of government. As we approach the end of our time in office, I'm really proud that we have lived up to this promise by pursuing a really ambitious implementation of Indigenous knowledge at every turn, everywhere we can in the department. President Biden's Investing in America agenda, including laws like the Inflation Reduction Act, the bipartisan infrastructure law, have delivered $45 billion to Indian country, to the 574 federally recognized tribal nations in the United States. It's a truly unprecedented sum of money. It's fundamentally changing how tribes are able to meet the needs of their people on the ground. But investing in Indian country, while incredibly important, is not enough. And that's why we have worked and continue to work with tribal leaders and knowledge holders to create and enhance programs to direct resources where they're needed most and in a way that makes processes more easy and accessible to tribes. These investments are shaping climate resilience efforts like our voluntary community-driven relocation program. Since 2022, it's allocated over $115 million to tribes on the front lines of the climate crisis to relocate critical infrastructure. These include communities like the Newtok Village in Alaska, who by the end of this year will complete relocation, reuniting their community in a new, safe and newly built location. It also includes the Quinault Nation in Washington State, which faces dangerous sea level rise and flooding. And I'm really pleased that Fawn Sharp is here with us, who will later speak to her tribe's experience with that program. Our Investing in America agenda has also transformed our efforts to restore essential ecosystems across the United States, like the prairie grasslands, the Great Plains, as well as historic salmon runs throughout Alaska, as components of our restoration and resilience framework at the department, which focuses on landscape-level revitalization of key ecosystems. We're bringing tribes directly into our decision-making processes. as we restore native grasses that keystone species like bison depend on, and aquatic habitat that salmon return to each year for spawning. We have partnered with numerous communities like the Winnebago tribe in Nebraska, which is growing their historic bison herds. And in fact, Secretary Haaland was out with them last week or the week before for a release, as well as tribes throughout Alaska's Yukon, Kuskokwim, and Norton Sound regions, where salmon numbers have plummeted due to climate change and extreme habitat loss. I really appreciate that my fellow federal partner and leader, Sean Babington, is also here with us today to share how our agencies are working together and have been working together since day one to deliver on these kinds of efforts, particularly with respect to the American bison. The Biden-Harris administration is also the first to leverage meaningfully co-stewardship in the work that we do, shared management and decision-making of federal lands as an intentional strategy to preserve ancestral homelands, to fulfill our trust and treaty responsibilities to U.S. tribes. And it really does look different with every tribe that we partner with in this space, and it's intentionally meant to. To date, our administration has entered into over 200 agreements with tribes, enabling them to apply their knowledge to the management of certain federal lands and waters. For example, in the state of Virginia, the Rappahannock tribe is now helping to oversee the management of 465 acres at Phones Cliff. It's a sacred site for them, and it's a critical migratory corridor for birds. And that's just an example. Across the country, we're developing these co-stewardship agreements, including for several of the historic national monuments that have been designated by President Biden, including Aviquame in Nevada. Beautiful spot. It now protects over 500,000 acres of a desert landscape from extractive development. And of course, it also helps to protect Aviquame itself, which is sacred to the human peoples of the region. Tribes also really continue to lead the way, working with us in realizing important climate progress for their own people. Thanks to funding from the Bureau of Indian Affairs Tribal Climate Resilience Program, communities like Blue Lake Rancheria in California will be able to expand its own community disaster preparedness campus to prepare for climate change impacts, including through use of indigenous knowledge. Other communities, like the Tulalip tribes of Washington, will blend advanced technologies with indigenous knowledge to better monitor changing wildlife populations while advancing their tribe's climate resilience. As we look to the future, we are working hard to ensure that regardless of who leads our department next, young indigenous leaders will find the opportunities that they are looking for so that they can steward the places that they know best and that are important to them. Thanks to Secretary Haaland's Indian Youth Service Corps, she established that in 2022, we've connected with young people across the country with projects that restore and benefit our shared lands and waters. Already, we've announced nearly $7 million and have launched over 50 projects across our bureaus, from bison and Lakota language revitalization in South Dakota to restoration of indigenous food systems in New Mexico. I could really, as you can tell, spend the next hour or so, which we don't have, sharing ways in which, we all have brought indigenous knowledge to the forefront of the work that we're all doing together. I know we have a panel to get to, so before we get to that, I just want to say, really in 4 short years, and this is my third run at Interior, we've really changed what it means for a federal agency to prioritize and meaningfully include indigenous knowledge in our decision making. But we know that for many reasons, for all the reasons, it's not just about the United States, it's not just about this administration, and we still all have a lot of work that we have to do. That's why this discussion is so important and what we're talking about, and why our team remains committed to working across partnerships to build the climate resilience we know that we desperately need, with indigenous knowledge leading the way. We are also lucky to have Andrea Carmen here, an international collaborator, to help us discuss the opportunities and the path ahead. So we're going to dive into our conversation. We have a wonderful panel. We're very, very lucky. Fawn Sharp, who currently sits as a member of the Nature Conservancy's Global Board. She's a citizen of the Quinault Indian Nation. She's also former president of the Quinault Indian Nation, former president of the National Congress of American Indians, and has been a longtime partner on a lot of things, Department of the Interior. So thank you, Fawn, for being here with us. Sean Babington, the Deputy Chief of Staff in the Office of the Secretary at the United States Department of Agriculture. Agriculture is one of our closest and best partners. We work together on, it feels like, almost everything. So thank you, Sean, for being here. And of course, we're also joined by Andrea Carmen, who's the Executive Director of the International Indian Treaty Council and co-chair of the Working Group for Local Communities and Indigenous Peoples Platform. Andrea is a member of the Yaqui Nation. And I'm going to let you introduce yourselves a little bit further as we open up the discussion. Fawn, we have engaged in so much exciting work together, as I mentioned, including in development of what I mentioned, the administration's tribal relocation program. So I'll turn it over to you to speak about how tribal nations are working collaboratively with the federal government to face the needs of communities like yours that are facing extreme climate risks on your homelands.
It is. Okay, great. Anjek Hiwishka. That is hello in my traditional Quinault language. I am so happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I think it's always an honor and a privilege to talk about the partnership and relationship that we have with the United States, in particular the Biden-Harris administration, who has done so much for tribal nations in the United States over the last 4 years. I briefly just want to talk about my nation and then pivot to how we partnered with the United States to really close a major gap and need within my nation. So when I served as president of the Quinault Indian Nation, I was originally elected in 2006, and my very first contact parties was in 2008 at COP29 in Poznan, Poland. That was right after President Obama was elected, but before he was sworn in. And at that time, as a young tribal leader, I found it incredibly difficult to have any conversation about climate change. I would mention the words climate change, the room would get quiet, and then someone would change the subject. So I had to leave the United States and begin to do international work. And so I've been working this issue for nearly 2 decades. And so when we looked at our nation back in 2006, we face multiple challenges of climate change, including sea level rise. Our ancestors used to fish and have millions of sockeye salmon returned to our tributaries. The year I got elected, we only had 3,000. I found out the glacier that feeds the mighty Quinault River disappeared. I stood on the shores and saw dead marine life. 2 miles of dead marine life due to oxygen depletion, ocean acidification, ocean warming. So it was very clear that whether we looked at our traditional ecological knowledge or basic science, the climate was in crisis and we had to take positive action. We then began to enlist partners at a regional level through the affiliated tribes of Northwest Indians and at the national level through the National Congress of American Indians. That led to ultimately this last administration. We saw with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, $500 million for tribal nations and a pilot project from the Biden-Harris administration to pilot moving our villages to higher ground. It was a $25 million project. To move our villages, we need $500 million. And so we knew it was quite clear that we're not going to see that coming out of the United States Congress anytime soon, that we must look in these spaces internationally for public-private partnerships to gain the resources we need to be able to make the investments, to move to higher ground, to restore our salmon habitat, build our ecosystems. And so I am so very grateful for everyone who participates in these type of sessions that understands the urgent need of Indigenous peoples, and you're helping advocate direct access to investment, to public and private resources, to development banks, et cetera, because we need that. And in the pilot project that the Biden-Harris administration piloted with us, we built into that a public-private partnership entity. And so I just spent a week in Bellagio, Italy, at a special session of the World Economic Forum on the question of mainstreaming natural capital. And I just want to make this point from the World Economic Forum. 5% of the population oversees 80% of the biodiversity. You flip that, we're outperforming everyone else by 400% with little to no resources. Imagine if we were resourced. That is the goal, and that is the objective of our leadership, present day and international places, because if the world fails to see nature through our lens, they're going to fail to perform at that level. And in my last 30 seconds, I want to speak to the political climate at home. I just want to say, regardless of political leadership, there is a force of nature. No one is immune when a hurricane or tornado or megafire hits, and no one is immune when nature actually provides good services to us. And so I'm part of the N party, the nature party. As an Indigenous person, we're always going to follow the lead of Mother Nature, our values, and that's the path that's going to lead us. Investing with Indigenous peoples is a return on the financial investment, the social investment, and the political investment. Siakwil, thank you.
Thank you so much, Fawn. Really appreciate your perspective and your partnership, your ongoing partnership. I'm going to turn it now over to Sean Babington with USDA. And as I mentioned, the Interior Department and USDA partner on a lot of things. But I know that our bison restoration work and the preservation of the prairie grasslands in particular has been a really important moment for us working together to elevate Indigenous knowledge and lifeways. So I'm hoping you'll talk about the tools we've been able to use, including the America the Beautiful Challenge. So over to you, Sean.
Well, thank you so much, Laura, for having me, and Andrea and Fawn just for sharing the stage with me, but really being such leaders and pioneers just over decades of work. This is such an important conversation, and being able to hear your perspective and share this all with the world here is so meaningful. So at the Department of Agriculture, we're just incredibly excited to be part of this dialogue. As Laura mentioned, we partner on so many things. Really, the key partners on managing the federal estate, the land base, but also on a host of different initiatives across the two departments, including the Tribal Buffalo Lifeways Collaboration, which is partnership with TNC, Native Americans in Philanthropy, and a host of partners that are really thinking about how we restore these ecosystems that supported such an incredible diversity, of life. So we're doing that through that investment, but also some other programs at USDA that are just really complementing a lot of the work that we're doing together. So folks may know the Department of Agriculture for a number of different things. You might know them because you have your local national forests. You might know them because you get your crop insurance subsidized by them because you're a farmer. You might know them because of the school lunch program or SNAP. It is a really broad federal department. And as Laura mentioned, over the last 4 years, I think we've really tried to redouble our efforts and rededicate ourselves through government-to-government consultation, through partnership with tribes, in incorporating Indigenous knowledge and a whole host of just really important lessons into all the work that we do across the board. So whether it's the collaboration on bison, whether it's investing in Indigenous meat processing grants. I heard, just really poignant stories about salmon. We invested $42 million last year across 8 different states to help increase economic opportunities for our tribal partners who are stewarding these species like bison and like salmon, but may not have the capacity to turn that into an economic opportunity because there's not a processing component to some of the work that's been done in the past. USDA is invested in helping to process that meat and get some of those meats to market, so these tribal partners can have this economic opportunity. So whether it's the collaboration on bison, RCPP, we've been working at USDA on an effort to protect and restore our old growth forests across the national forest system. We manage 193 million acres of national forests across the country. And as we've gone through an effort led by President Biden through the signing of an executive order, we've gone through a bunch of listening sessions, a bunch of engagement sessions, and incorporating Indigenous knowledge into the types of strategies we need to protect and restore our old growth forests. I'll just really quickly, a story I was out in the field with, I'm sure someone who you both know, Cody Desatel from the Intertribal Timber Council, coring trees and saying, okay, what are we learning here from Western science? What are we learning from Indigenous knowledge? And how can we braid those two things together to make sure that we're doing the best that we can by our forests? So there are just more, we could do this for an hour just of all the cool stuff and really important things we've done over the last 4 years, but it's just such a pleasure to be part of this conversation. I'll leave it there for USDA for now and look forward to the dialogue. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks so much, Sean, and appreciate it. And it's obvious we've made great strides in this work, but it's also worth noting again that there is much more work to do always, and there's no one size fits all to any of this. So I'm going to turn it over to Andrea Carmen and get her perspective on what more we need to do in investments and work. I also want programming note. I know Andrea is going to have to leave us at 1:45. She's got another very important engagement that she is leading. So thank you for squeezing us in, and over to you.
Thank you for inviting me, my relatives. I was in the first 3 years of the facilitative working group for the Indigenous Peoples Platform that, of course, was called for at the Paris Agreement and was operationalized with the creation of the facilitative working group at the Katowice, Poland COP. And each of the 7 Indigenous peoples regions was able to select an actual representative, not an independent expert, to sit on this body. And it's very unique in the UN system in that way, is we were true representatives, and I had the honor, I guess you could say, of being the second co-chair of the facilitative working group. And it specifically focuses on the issue of Indigenous knowledge and science. Don't forget that we also have science, not just traditional knowledge. But a strong position that we were able to implement was to develop a rights-based framework for the sharing and use of that knowledge based on the internationally recognized right to free, prior, informed consent. And the International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change, which is the Indigenous caucus here that coordinates advocacy and participation of Indigenous peoples from all 7 regions, has the firm position that we can't consider the use or sharing of Indigenous peoples' knowledge and science without incorporating a rights-based perspective. We can't consider it independent of rights or full participation of Indigenous peoples, which is also our right. So as long as the U.S. government is uplifting the important role, which we completely agree with, of utilizing Indigenous knowledge, practice, and science of our knowledge holders to further their understanding of what we have to do as a human family in the United States and globally to avert and minimize, not just adapt and mitigate climate change. We also want to keep uplifting the full participation of Indigenous peoples and our knowledge holders in that process, as well as the recognition of our rights. Not only our rights to, as Article 31 of the UN Declaration on Rights of Indigenous Peoples says, the right to control, manage, and develop our own cultural heritage, which specifically includes in that article knowledge of flora and fauna, seeds, and other cultural expressions and sciences. But also to spread that out to our participation here. And I want to uplift the new role of Indigenous peoples in the Santiago Network for actually having our knowledge and expertise recognized formally, getting away from that false distinction for Indigenous peoples of developed and developing countries, but also having us be able to request expertise but also share, whether it's fire prevention knowledge, what we're doing. We're desert farmers where I'm from, Yaqui Nation, sustainable water use, seed trading, installation and revitalization of our traditional methods, and sharing that with other tribal nations that are from the same desert ecosystem. We can expand that to globally. And that's what we're doing, both with the Indigenous Peoples Platform, but also with Santiago Network, and throughout the negotiations here at the United Nations. Thank you. 4 minutes.
Thank you so much, Andrea, and thank you for your leadership in this forum and at home, in your home region, and so many other places. We're going to open it up for a couple questions, and I'm actually going to start with you because I know that you have to leave, and I want to get your perspective in particular on question number one, which is, what are one or two forward-looking actions that you would propose or recommend to expand application of Indigenous knowledge to address climate resilience needs, to be sure that it continues to inform decision-making?
Well, one thing that I think it's important to be clear on is Indigenous peoples are already doing this on our own. We've learned through millennia that we can't necessarily depend on any national government or the UN system to give us the support that we need to ensure that we have sustainable food systems, that we have sustainable water systems. There's a lot of examples, either from Hawaii, from our nation, from our neighbor Tohono O'odham, where we are restoring our original methods for saving and protecting and preserving water. And my best advice to everyone here, not just Indigenous peoples, when you're addressing climate change, please, the most important thing is to know where your food and water are going to come from. We have to be here on behalf of our peoples to defend and try to move the global agenda so that it will keep to the 1.5 temperature increase goal that we've all agreed with, including the states. We don't see that happening as much as it should, and unfortunately, what we consider false solutions are being pushed, like what they call transition minerals, lithium mining, against the will of Indigenous peoples whose traditional water and food systems as well as sacred areas are being threatened by what we consider false solutions. We don't see the market economy as a way to provide what we need as peoples and people, including Indigenous peoples. So we're looking for other methods and other systems as well as support for what we can contribute from our traditional knowledge holders and practices on these issues.
Thank you very much. And when you need to go, you can get up and go.
The ministerial high-level meeting on just transition, and I was selected to present for the Indigenous Caucus. So I can't miss that, as way on the other side.
Just a little important.
I better, yeah. I better be there in my seat when they call on me. My brothers and sisters will have my hide, if not. So sure. I better start working over there. But thank you for listening, and I leave you in good hands.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Okay, same question over to you, Fawn. What are one or two forward-looking things you would propose to ensure that we're securing Indigenous knowledge and its role in how we address climate resilience?
Yes, thank you for that very important question. I think one of the most important things that everyone could do going forward, and I'll pick up where Andrea left off, and that is valuing nature. We're seeing a whole new economy emerge in which the systems are seeking to value nature. And we're taught that in systems where we do want to monetize nature, there's the laws of supply and demand in a business structure. As supplies shrink, like water and the demand goes up, price goes up. And it reminds me of when I was in 8th grade, a tribal elder talked to our class and said, someday water's going to be more valuable than oil. At the time, it seemed counterintuitive, but now it's true. And so if the world, in seeking to monetize nature, doesn't see it through our lens, they're going to miss the opportunity to perform at a 400% level, as I mentioned in my opening remarks. And so it's critically important as we begin to look at valuing nature that we see it through the Indigenous people's lens. Because I often say you're not going to find our bank account in a Swiss bank account. You're not going to find it valued on Wall Street. You're going to find it in pristine river systems, the pristine coastline of Washington State where I live. And as the climate crisis intensifies, our bank account and those values are going to continue to rise, and there's going to be more and more pressure to gain access to direct and overtake Indigenous values in terms of stewarding our lands. And so I see that on the horizon, and I think that's probably the most important thing we could do as we seek to value nature, is see it through our lens, so we all share in our value system, not in the laws of supply and demand and valuing things based on scarcity, but valuing nature based on abundance and sustainability for 7 generations. That's the new economic model that we all need to pursue.
Thanks so much, Ron. Yeah, the importance of utilizing an Indigenous people's lens with regard to knowledge. Sean, same question to you.
Well, there are so many things that we've started that we need to continue to make progress on. And as you alluded to, not a secret, there's going to be a transition here. But, at the Department of Agriculture, we have not always done the best job of reaching all Americans in the work that we've done. We've known that for a long time. This administration, the Biden-Harris administration, and under the leadership of our Secretary Vilsack, we've really redoubled our efforts to amend our programs, modify our programs, engage in that nation-to-nation consultation and dialogue to figure out how we can update and incorporate Indigenous knowledge and lessons from our tribal partners into everything we're doing. One of the biggest things that I want our folks to continue to work on, and that we need to continue to do better on, is how do we just make that more real across all the things that we do? So we talked a little bit at the outset about investments in meat processing, and then bison habitat restoration. We're going to continue to do those things. But I'd also like to see us double down on the purchasing of those exact products that we're funding the processing of, right? USDA is a huge purchaser of food, for a whole host of reasons. But the school lunch program, a bunch of other procurement things. We can align a lot of those programs with some of the tribal leaders who are producing some of these native foods. And that's something that our office and the Secretary's office, but also our Office of Tribal Relations, our friends in our farm production mission area, we're all really trying to think through. So that, that's one thing that I want to see carried forward, and I think we can continue to do more on. The other piece, which is a little bit more natural resource focused, but is so important to this conversation, is the restoration of tribal homelands. And something that, going back to the history of our department, we manage 193 million acres of land that is the national forest system. Most of those acres were the ancestral homelands of our tribal partners and tribal communities. And through collaboration with Congress, a lot of those nation-to-nation and government-to-government consultations, we've started to return some of those tribal homelands. A couple of very recent examples that we're really pleased with is, and we're starting, but 12,000 acres in Minnesota to the Leech Lake Band of Ojibwe. Those were acres that were part of our Chippewa National Forests that are now held in trust for the Leech Lake Band. And then just last week, the Yavapai Apache, we restored 3,000 acres, over 3,000 acres of their land across several national forests down in Arizona. This is not just, and Fawn, I'd love to hear your perspective on this, but I think not just meaningful in a historical and a spiritual perspective, but also in an economic perspective, because all of a sudden those lands are available for a whole host of opportunities that are not currently available. So we've just been so pleased to be able to pick up this work and carry it forward, but a lot more needs to be done, and those are a couple examples where I see that hopefully continuing into the future, regardless of who's in charge. So thanks.
Thanks, Sean. Did you want to respond, or we can...
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think being able to restore tribal homelands not only provides the value back to restoring nature, but the spiritual connection that Indigenous peoples have. I often have said that we relinquish millions of acres of land through treaties. We never relinquish our spiritual connection. And so no matter where one travels inside the United States, that is ground and soil that stands on millennium of songs, of prayer, of ceremony. And it is one of the reasons, I mean, people have looked at the condition that we're in, Indigenous peoples. We're on the front lines of climate change. We're disproportionately impacted, and we have little to no resources. And one would think that we're weak and vulnerable, but I often say to the contrary, we're strong, we're resilient, and though we face multi-generational challenges, we have multi-generational knowledge and wisdom that we're bringing to the table, and our participation is indispensable to solutions. And that is why it is so important, and I so value the relationship we have with our federal partners who not only see us, but see the role that we play in having a seat right at the table and an ability to be able to restore traditional homelands, to be able to engage with our young people. And I guess that's the last point I would make on this particular topic. I think it's important as Indigenous peoples, we prepare the next generation and we look out 7 generations. And I think that's another takeaway for all of us. The challenge is because they're multi-generational, we have to ensure a seamless transition of leadership. And that is one of the reasons I was so happy when Secretary Holland mentioned the youth initiatives, because that is preparing that next generation. A 15-year-old kid today, in 10 years, is going to be a college graduate. And the plans that we develop, it's going to be that generation that implements and executes the vision. And so it's so important that we bring along our young people, get them on the ground, get them in these meetings and these sessions to teach them so that all of us have a seamless transition of leadership as the climate crisis intensifies. We need their passion, their heart, their hopes, and their dreams to inspire the work that we do every single day.
Thank you, Fawn. I couldn't agree more. And thanks to you both. I mean, I think you've both lifted up really important components of the future and the ways in which the federal government, the Biden-Harris administration in the last 4 years has centered Indigenous knowledge, tribal consultation, and partnership, and ways in which it can continue. I think everyone should expect it should continue. That's a big part of continuing. I know we only have a few minutes left, but wanted to touch as well. We talked a bit about co-stewardship. And I know, we've worked on it at the Department of the Interior. A number of examples. Like I said, it looks different with every tribe with whom we collaborate and partner. But would love perspective from each of you on your experience with co-stewardship, and how can we continue also to strengthen that piece as well, because it fundamentally has to do with the sort of public land system, Indigenous peoples' land system, and how we're going to be managing going forward into the future. So do you want to start, Fawn?
Yes, sure. I think that is so important to look at co-stewardship in that I've often viewed the relationship not only bilateral but multilateral. And so when tribal nations work together, there's 574 tribal nations throughout the United States, and we have the National Congress of American Indians. Each region has a regional network of tribal nations. From my region, it's the Affiliated Tribes of Northwest Indians. It's over 70 tribal nations, Alaska to California, Nevada up into Montana. And so we drive an international agenda, and I often say that it's important for Indigenous leaders to be engaged at a local level, at a regional, national, and international level. And so when we partner in co-stewardship opportunities, we bring a vast amount of knowledge to the table, not just tribe by tribe, but collectively tribal nations are coming together to really provide an agenda that looks to the past, but also is inspired by the future. And we know that when we partner, it's important for us to view each and every dialogue, each and every management practice to bring that knowledge and wisdom to bear, because we don't have a margin of error at this point. We have a sense of urgency. And so co-stewardship is so important, and having us as equal partners at the table is so important. And when those things are there fundamentally and as a matter of foundational principle, a lot can be unlocked, a lot of hopes and dreams, knowledge, wisdom, but more importantly, the value of our relationship in working together and to leverage our opportunities and our relationship, because you can't even put a price tag on the value of being seen, of being visible, of having a role in decision making. You can't put a value on that, but it provides value for generations to come.
Thank you. John?
This topic of tribal co-stewardship is so incredibly important when we think about a lot of the accomplishments of the last 4 years, and I think building that foundation moving forward. Secretary Holland and Secretary Vilsack, in the early days of the administration, signed a joint secretarial order on tribal co-stewardship, and both departments rededicated themselves to looking for those opportunities, whether it be for this, that, or the other. It was, as was mentioned earlier, it's not a one-size-fits-all thing. It's what are our partners across the country looking for, and how can we work together to increase opportunities? So a couple examples. The Department of Agriculture's Forest Service has done several dozen of these. I think we're up to 160 co-stewardship agreements across the country, which was in the single digits a few years ago, including millions of dollars that go along with those agreements. But each one is different. And, there are a couple that I think we're really proud of. One that we've been working on an area with Interior is the Black Hills National Forest and the watershed surrounding Rapid City, South Dakota, which was threatened by mineral development. We're working with the Department of Interior on a package of sort of policies and investments that's going to both protect that area for 20 years from mineral development, but then also working with several tribes in the Great Sioux Nation on a co-stewardship agreement that can transfer and share ownership of the Forest Service Visitor Center that anchors this whole area. The area is anchored by a reservoir that's a major recreation hub for the area, and we now have that co-stewardship agreement where our partners are helping to run and share in the economic benefits there. Similar situation in Alaska. The largest national forest that USDA has is called the Tongass National Forest in southeast Alaska, 17 million acres. And I should know this, but I would wager it is the most visited feature on the forest is the Mendenhall Glacier, just outside of Juneau, Alaska, if anyone's ever been there. It's a magnificent piece of public land, and we have a co-stewardship agreement with our partners in the Tlingit and Haida nations to also run a lot of the operations around those national forest lands to increase economic opportunities and to bring in that interpretive aspect and that indigenous knowledge into what is really an incredible space that we need to tell that story. So those are two of 160 or 180 examples, but we're really proud of that work. It needs to continue, and it's been such a pleasure to partner with TNC and so many other folks, and certainly the Department of Interior on that effort. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, I think one of the most important things that I hope everyone is hearing is the intentionality of this work, this partnership work, this collaborative work that is centered on indigenous knowledge and tribal partnerships kind of every step of the way in terms of how we're looking at the work we do, at the resilience of shared landscapes, and sort of, an ecosystem wide restoration opportunities with tribes very, very locally, regionally, and I think we are on a path that I think is sustainable, and there's really sort of no turning back. Everyone is at the table as a full partner, including, I was reflecting, Sean, when you were talking about the work we've been able to do with Bears Ears National Monument, one of the first where we will have a tribal coalition, co-managing those sacred and spiritual lands in Utah. So, it's the conversations like this, the partnerships that we've built, the work that we've done together, and it's going to make our collective work stronger on an ongoing basis. And I just want to thank both of you for being here. Both of you have sort of been fully in on this work and our time together. Thank you.
Thank you for coming to the U.S. Center. Our next event is at 3:30, Youth Leadership and Expert Perspectives on the Future of Coral Reefs. Then at 4:45, we have a youth networking event here at the U.S. Center. Please leave your headphones on the table or on the chairs. Hello and welcome to the U.S. Center. Now is the time to put on your headphones. That already should be on. If you can hear me speaking clearly, that's great. If there's any point during the event today and they're not working, just raise your hand and we will help you out. Or if there's a spare pair near you, try those. Maybe they'll work. But welcome to the U.S. Center. Our event today is on youth leadership and expert perspectives on the future of coral reefs. Take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to our event, Youth Leadership in Coral Reef Conservation. My name is Mariana Rocha de Souza. I'm a coral reef biologist based at the University of Hawaii, but also a member of the International Coral Reef Society. The International Coral Reef Society is a global organization uniting all coral biologists working on coral and coral enthusiasts, people working on coral restoration. And ICS, the International Coral Reef Society, has been at the forefront of promoting scientific research, fostering collaboration, and advocating for policies that protect these vital ecosystems. Coral reefs are not only stunningly biodiverse, but also essential to the livelihoods of millions of people around the world. As we face climate challenges, the Society recognizes the critical importance of engaging the next generation of leaders to protect these invaluable ecosystems. So today's event aligns perfectly with this mission. In honor of Youth Day at COP29, we are spotlighting the incredible work being done by youth advocates alongside groundbreaking contributions from scientists to address the urgent threats facing coral reefs. Together, we explore successful stories, innovative solutions, and how intergenerational collaboration can drive meaningful progress. So our goal today is to inspire action, share practical lessons from conservation efforts, and empower everyone in this room to contribute to protecting coral reefs in the communities that depend on them. We're very honored to have a great panel with us, including youth leaders and coral experts who will share their stories, insights, and strategies for creating resilient marine ecosystems. We'll start with opening remarks by Susan Elgar-Baraway. She's the Vice Chair of IOC Africa, the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO. She's also the Vice President of the National Institute of Oceanography and Fisheries of Egypt. Susan, thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Mariana, for this introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, and passionate advocates for our oceans, and especially the coral reefs. It's my honor to stand before you today as the Vice President of the Marine Hazard Mitigation Center and at the National Institute of Oceanography and Fisheries of Egypt, and also the Vice Chair of IOC Africa of UNESCO. We gather here under the support from the International Coral Reef Society. Thank you for that. And the care about the climate, united by shared commitments to the future of our coral reefs, an ecosystem that is not only vital for the marine environment, but at the same time is also essential for the livelihoods, cultures, and culture of millions around the world, and also the biodiversities. Today's events are like the title, Riding Tides, is very catchable, symbolizing more than just the challenges we face. It represents the opportunity we have to empower youth and harness expert preserves in safeguarding our marine environments. We, as marine science people, always say this: coral reefs are representing like the rainforest of the sea, rich, diverse, beauty, and also a lot of biodiversity that lives together. Yet they are also among the most threatened ecosystems, unfortunately, on our plants, like the photo here with a lot of bleaching appearing. Climate change, they are threatened from not only climate change by the heat stress and everything, but also with pollution and the unstable practices from the human. But let us not dwell solely on these challenges. This gathering is a testament to our collective resolve to act. We are here to amplify the voices of young leaders, you, who will be the steward for our oceans in the future, in the coming years. Your energy, creativity, and also innovative approaches are crucial to developing solutions that can mitigate the impacts of human activities and climate changes on coral reefs. As we engage in discussions today, let us remember that the future of coral reefs is not just an environmental issue. It is a social issue and economic also. Healthy reefs support fisheries, support coastal lines and protect them, and also invest more in the blue economy through tourism activities, all of which are integral for our national economic values, especially for the developing regions. I encourage each one of you to share his insights and challenge thinking and collaborate with one another. Our success depends on our ability to unite diverse perspectives for scientists, policymakers, and educators to the very youth who will inherit this planet. Together, we can create a rising tide of action, a movement that not only preserves our coral reef but also inspire future generations to protect our precious marine environment. Thank you for inviting me to this important event, and together we had to embark this journey and also hope to determine as we work towards a sustainable future for our ocean, and we all depend on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. El-Garabawi. And at this point, I'm very excited to introduce to you all the rest of our panelists. So my name, first of all, is Dr. Lauren Gibson. I work at the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, in the United States. I am the advisor on youth engagement to our NOAA administrator, the head of our agency, and I work on bringing more youth voice into what we do at NOAA. And I'm joined here today by an amazing panel of women. I'm very excited about this conversation. Dr. Rachel Peixoto is joining us from King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia. Thank you for being here. Renee Smith is joining us as well. She's an environmental officer at Grenada's Ministry of Climate Resilience. Thanks for being here, Renee. And you've already heard from Dr. Mariana Rocha de Sosa. She is a postdoctoral researcher at University of Hawaii at Manoa, and is also an affiliate of the International Coral Reef Society, as is Dr. Peixoto. So with that, I will let everyone kind of introduce themselves a little bit more fully, tell us about yourself, the work that you're doing that brought you here today, and any connection that you have with this topic at hand, young people and coral reefs.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you all for organizing it, and it was a lot on Mariana as well. So I am a microbiologist, and as you mentioned, I'm representing the International Coral Reef Society here, but also the International Society for Microbiology, because I'm the president of this other organization. And for both of them, we've been promoting science that can actually give us a way out of climate change, or at least some tools that can help us fight climate change. And from especially for coral reefs, and considering the pace of mortality and what we've been seeing, in some cases, some reefs completely dying in an interval of months, we really need science. I think it's the only way out. It's the only thing that can help us now. And it's not so difficult. So as both ISME and ICRS, as these institutions and other scientific societies around the globe, we are joining forces to try to develop this framework for the quick development and deployment, which is the most important part of it, of science and technology that can help us. And we've recently prepared this document that was published on the first day of COP29, that was published by 14 scientific journals at the same time, where we make this call to action. And you use coral reefs as one example of an entire ecosystem that can go extinct within our lifetimes. It's not that our kids will see it, it's that we may see it. And the idea behind this call to action is that during COVID, we had a very interesting and straightforward framework to deploy science. So we had some ideas and some research on the vaccines, and we quickly developed tools to accelerate the development and deploy it at scale, right? So we also have science for climate change. We also have not only microbiology, but other things that are being done and developed in the labs that could be accelerated and quickly deployed if we had a framework that could accelerate the obtention of funding, integrate stakeholders, academic and the industry, and also cut the red tape without missing the rigor and the steps. Right? So this is what we advocate for. And I think a very strong connection that I have with the topic is that I have a team that is composed by young career researchers. And I know how hard it is for scientists, especially young scientists, to work on coral reefs nowadays. Because you go to the reef and it's beautiful, and a few months later you can go back to the same place and it's all that. But if you don't start restoring it now, it's not going to be restorable anymore. So this is the hope that we need to use to keep going, and science and technology can offer a key for that.
Amazing. Thank you. Renee, do you want to introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an absolute pleasure to be here to represent all the youths. So as you mentioned, I'm with the Ministry of Climate Resilience, the Environment and Renewable Energy in Grenada. So I'm from the large ocean developing state. We're no longer a small island developing state since we're surrounded by water. My academic background is in marine, wildlife and conservation biology. And my connection with this team, I've spent the last 5 years, the last decade actually, underwater. So I spent most of that period exploring the marine ecosystem of Grenada. Just 2 years ago, I witnessed firsthand. So while in school, you would always get the example of, oh, the Great Barrier Reef is being bleached and destroyed. And now, over the past 2 years, I've witnessed firsthand the mass bleaching of our reef from the north of the island all the way to the south. And that devastating impact has sort of reinforced my commitment to further conserve our marine ecosystem. It's truly devastating to just see all these white patches from miles of spreading across the oceans. Thank you so much for having me.
So excited to have you. Go ahead, Mariana.
Yeah, so I'm a scientist. I got my PhD in coral reef biology at the University of Hawaii. So my background has been in science. I also was very interested in policy and very curious about how can our science actually be influencing policy? Like, we know as scientists what's happening to coral reefs, but how can we make policymakers also hear us and implement our demand into policy? So I was able to get a fellowship at NOAA for 1 year and kind of got involved into policy like at NOAA, like learn how things work at the federal level. But I still miss science. So after this fellowship, decided to come back and do a postdoc. So right now, like working on coral reefs again, like doing science on coral reefs, but still want to be involved in policy. I think as scientists, we cannot just be talking to ourselves. We cannot just be publishing papers to ourselves. We need our science to be relevant. So that's why we're here and trying to have, like having as many engagement as we can to try to make policymakers hear what's happening. And I'm also very passionate about youth engagement. That's why, like I suggested this panel, I consider myself youth too. And I have experienced how hard it is for us to be here. Like, there are so few opportunities and lack of training, lack of opportunities. So I think it's a very important conversation, not just the science, but also how can we bring more young people into the conversation.
Thank you. I'm biased as an advisor on youth engagement, but I love that last point of how can we get more young people into these conversations. People always talk about young people are the future, right? They're the future leaders, but there's so much amazing, amazing work being done by current youth leaders, right? It's not a future thing. It's now as well. And young people are such important stakeholders and partners in the work that we do. So how do we elevate those voices, invite young people to have a seat at the table where those decisions are being made in policy places? And that's what I'm really excited to be working on in my current position at NOAA. So I'm super excited to be a part of this conversation and chat with you all more about this intersection of young people and corals. So to set the stage a little bit, can our two coral scientists here, Raquel and Mariana, can you give us a little bit of information about the current state of the science around corals? What is the latest? What are the challenges that we're facing and the potential areas for solutions or hope that you're finding through the science?
Sure. So I don't know how many scientists are in the room, how many coral biologists, I don't want to assume. But coral are animals, they're not rocks. Many people think they're rocks. And they support an incredible ecosystem. So corals have an interaction, a symbiotic interaction with a microscopic algae, we call zooxanthellae, that lives inside them. And this algae provides food for the coral, like about 90% of the energy of the coral comes from the symbiotic algae that photosynthesizes and shares the food of the coral, and the coral instead, in return, provides protection for the algae. But when the temperature of the water increases, which is happening now because of climate change, the ocean actually absorbs about 92% of the heat in the atmosphere. So the temperature of the water has been increasing. So when the temperature of the water increases, this symbiotic interaction becomes dysfunctional. The coral actually expels the algae and becomes white. That's what is coral bleaching. If you guys have seen photos or heard about it, that's what coral bleaching is. So the coral is actually fasting, like it's hungry. It lost the main source of energy it had, and it's bleaching. So it might survive for a little bit, but not for longer. So that's the status, that's what's happening right now. And we have seen the coral bleaching events happening more and more. Since the 80s, we have seen a 5-fold increase in bleaching events. And we have already lost 2/3 of coral reefs worldwide. So it is a real crisis. We had this year one of the biggest bleaching events. It happened in multiple locations in Florida, for example. Most of the corals died. So this is actually happening in front of our eyes. We might lose an ecosystem if nothing's actually done. But there is science. There is some hope. The hope is actually it only applies if we actually do something. So the main thing we need to do is, of course, cut our emissions. That's why we're here at COP. But there are solutions that have been coming at small scale, science solutions. So, for example, we have been doing assisted evolution. So we select corals, we breed the corals that seem to be more resilient, and we deploy these corals on the reef, and we track these corals to see how these corals are doing. We also expose corals to different temperature conditions, similar way. For example, if you want to run a marathon, if you're not prepared, that's going to be super hard. But if you train many times, we're going to be more prepared. So we're doing similar thing with the corals, trying to train corals to be more prepared to heat stress. So expose these corals multiple times to heat stress, and we have seen that over time, they become more resilient to heat. We also have seen similar thing on the reef. So reefs that have been bleached multiple times, we see corals actually become more resilient to heat stress. So there are signs of hope, but again, the hope only makes sense if we actually can maintain our temperature to a certain level.
Yeah, and to add to these different things that are being tested, in addition to restoration overall, like to grow corals in nurseries and outplant them, to still keep some of the diversity. We have been developing also some medicine for corals. So we've been trying to see if we can give them nutrients, vitamins, food, and microbial therapies like probiotics. So this is what I've been doing. Corals, like all of us, they rely on the associated microbes that live with them. And these microbes are naturally found in the marine ecosystems. They are abundant, and they provide corals with nutrients that corals cannot acquire by themselves, and also protect them against disease and toxic compounds. What happens is that, and what's happening right now, is that these good microbes are being replaced by pathogens. So they also die. They are also sensitive to stress, and pathogens are not. So we are having now a shift in different ecosystems, but in this case, we are talking about coral reefs, towards a more pathogenic microbiome in our planet. These microbes can also affect other organisms like fish, ultimately maybe even us, because some of us eat fish. And what we are trying to do is that we are trying to restore the microbiome. So we grow the good bacteria. When the temperature starts to increase, we go back to the reef, we apply this bacteria high amounts during these weeks of stress. And with that, we've been managing to keep the good bacteria and keep corals alive by constantly reintroducing these bacteria that can give them nutrients and protections, and so they work as medicine during these times of stress. And this is working. We have very good results. We've been doing this in the field. We've been studying it for the last 14 years. In the more recent years, we studied this in the field, and we've been looking at the other organisms in the reef to see how the entire ecosystem responds to that. And we've been having very good results and protection of other organisms that are not even the targets, because again, we are avoiding the spread of pathogens. So we are making the entire reef healthier. But as Mariana said, this is one of the things we can do, but we also have to work, and this is important for us to retain these reefs while we work on the main problem with the temperature problem. But there is a limit for what we can do. So this is one of the things we can do to retain the diversity so that we can grow and build on it as corals are dying so fast.
Thanks for that. I love the analogies that both of you used as far as corals fasting. You know, that can be a temporary thing, but it can't be forever. Of giving corals medicine, again, that can be a temporary thing to help corals out and help them in while we are working towards those longer term solutions. But you're not going to take medicine for the rest of your life to, you know, solve a core problem. So thank you for those updates on the science. So in addition to the science, the people power is the other part of this, right? That long-term solution that we're looking for around carbon mitigation and changing our own behaviors. And like we were talking about earlier, youth are really leading the way in pushing for these big changes in our societies and in our policy. So I want to turn to you, Renee, and ask you, you know, how can young professionals kind of leverage their voices and make that impact on policy? Do you have any stories of your own that you want to share, or any insights into this that you want to share?
Sure. Thank you for the question. I would say first you would have to give them the opportunity. I'm truly grateful to be part of my delegation and to be in the room with the minister and other decision and policy makers to give my input on this global platform. So giving the youth an opportunity to sit at the table, that is crucial to influence policies. We bring innovative energy and ideas, and I think it's important to get the youths involved just by simply giving them the opportunity. On a local level, I would say you engage the local communities and the youths, and whether it's coral restoration or mangrove replanting, get them involved, because we do care and the future is ours, so we have to protect it for the next generation. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Renee. That's great. And just to add a little bit from the NOAA perspective, where I'm coming from, I think that's such a big part of what we're trying to do more and more around, you know, giving young people a seat at the table and actively pulling that chair up to the decision-making table, inviting folks into that space. We have a program that we started about 2 years ago called the Young Changemakers Fellowship that brings high school voices into NOAA. We have 15 students from across the country and territories and tribal nations who are represented in this fellowship. They're with us virtually for a year, both taking local action on the ground in their home communities, everywhere from Guam to Columbia, Maryland, as well as engaging in regular discussions with NOAA's leadership. So they meet every quarter with our administrator and share their perspectives on our priorities, things that we should be focusing more on, things we should be focusing less on. And we're trying this out for the first time in NOAA history to bring those perspectives, again, to the decision-making table with the goal of helping share both the microphone and the policy writing pen with young folks who, again, are leading the way in all of this, are super important partners and stakeholders in all of the work that we do. So I'm really excited, again, about this conversation, and thank you for sharing your perspectives there, Renee. And now, okay, so we've talked a little bit about the state of the science with corals. We've talked a little bit about youth engagement broadly. Now, to kind of tie things together, how does the science and how do the young people kind of work together to address this problem of mass coral bleaching? How are we going to avoid a 5th global coral bleaching event by working together? Does anyone want to start kind of addressing the big question of the panel?
I can start. This initiative that I mentioned at the beginning, that is this joint effort among different microbiology societies, but also ICRS and other colleagues. It's all about it because we are offering stakeholders and governments, policymakers, we are offering a framework where scientists can work together with them to implement this science and to take this out of the lab together. But for that, we need and we think that we should do we should take a global, use a global consensus on the science, but take a more local and regional approach. And for that, we need the local ambassadors, we need the local youth to work together. So the idea is that we have this main call and we have this organization, this initiative, and we know the science that is in the lab that can be deployed. But we need to talk to governments to make it happen at the local level and at scale. And for that, we need to talk to the local community. We need to understand the expertise that is available. We need to understand the local regulations. We need to understand the local culture so that we can deploy it. And we can only do that. And as societies, we are planning to use our ambassadors to do that with the local people, and that includes the young representatives of our society. And I think that working together with the local ambassadors, with the local youth, we can actually take this idea to the next level. So use the science, connect with stakeholders, and deploy it, which is what we need.
I just want to add to what you say. I think we also need to connect the root cause, which is climate change, and not just create a temporary fix. The more we do coral restoration, but then the water temperature is still heating, and it's like a cycle, an endless cycle. So we still need to address the root cause.
And just to add to that, because I wasn't clear, for this perspective that we're taking, we are actually proposing solutions to mitigate climate change. I'm using one of the 6 things that we are proposing, which is treat the cause, but microbes drive all of the biogeochemical cycle, so they can also fix carbon. They can reduce emissions, and you are totally right. We cannot just rely on the Band-Aids. We need to tackle the cause, and science is available, but we need to really take the next step forward and implement it.
I think we need both. We need the science for sure. That's what's provided us the data. That's the monitoring data that we need to see the state of the reefs. But we need the youth. We need excitement. We need scientists cannot do everything. Scientists are busy. They're collecting data. They're writing papers. They're getting grants. But I feel like young people, they have such a strong voice in social media. They know how to talk to different people. They have the excitement. They are creative. So like we need both, and we need to create opportunities for young people to actually interact more with the scientists, to actually learn how to learn the science and then work together to disseminate the science. I think scientists need to recognize we need the need of young people because, young people are creative. We have huge impact on social media. Just to tell an example, and also we need to create opportunities for young people to be involved in policy. So to create an example, we had many young people, students interested in going to COP, right? Like as scientists, PhD students, the result of COP impact our research, but how does the discussions at COP happen? Like, what is COP? So they would contact me many times, like, hey, Mariana, I'm interested. Like, how can I learn more about this? Every time I would come to COP, I do like a webinar with the students. But this time, we were able to get about 20 virtual badges, like not just from RCS, but I contacted other organizations too that had badges that they were not going to use, and we were able to have about 20 students right now following COP online, and like not just following, but I'm trying to follow up with them. So write like regular emails, trying to update them on the negotiations. They're not here, but that's a way to make them get involved in the policy and learn more about what's happening here.
That's awesome. I'm glad that first step towards physically being in the room is being taken. That virtually first, maybe next year, having folks physically in the room and more young people up on stage with us too. That's amazing. I also want to point out I love the applicability of the research that both of you are doing and the focus on engaging with community, and kind of that connection between youth and community. I'm going to put my social scientist nerd hat on for a second. There's so much good research that shows the impact that young people have on their broader community. We often talk about youth engagement, and what some folks fail to mention is that when young people are engaged, it's not just them that we're engaging, right? There's so much intergenerational learning that happens between young people and their parents, for example. We have research that shows how much educated young people who are taking action on climate change actually influence their parents' thinking on climate change and their parents' actions. And we also have new research that shows that, when young people are involved in local climate action and local communication of those issues, local officials change their minds too and are more willing to take different steps themselves. So when we're engaging young people in policy making, in action around things like climate mitigation and coral reef conservation, that's a pathway towards engaging the full community, right? So I'm excited about that connection as well, that, we can engage young people through universities, as budding scientists, as part of your lab, as mentees. We can engage folks within the policy work and on-the-ground community work, and all of that kind of ripples out into community change, which I think is what we really need when we're dealing with an issue like coral bleaching and coral conservation that's so large in scale that it's beyond what any one of us can do as either a scientist or an activist or a government official. Amazing.
And as entrepreneurs, because I think there are lots of initiatives, and we've been seeing that, especially for restoration, where young scientists and young entrepreneurs are actually making a huge difference because they are more keen to take risks, try some innovative ideas, and make a difference.
Amazing. All right. So those were my questions for the panel. I would love to open it up to audience Q&A if anyone here has questions. Yes. Tom will be running a mic to you.
Thanks so much. This was a great panel. And my question is actually not so much about youth, but it's related. I'm actually from Florida. We're living through this coral bleaching nightmare, and I'm curious what your thoughts are on artificial reefs as maybe a temporary solution to figuring out what the probiotics are going to be able to do for heat resistance and living with, not doing endothermic type cooling of the reef area, but are those viable pathways we should be thinking about as we help to get the sources of anthropogenic climate change under control? Thank you.
At this moment, I think we are trying everything. all of the different solutions are being tested, and I think they're all valuable because I don't think one solution will solve the problem. I think we'll need all hands on deck, and all of the different ideas, they have a place, and they have a role to be played. So I think a combination of all of these efforts can retain these corals and the function, because this is the most important thing. We need to keep the ecological function of these ecosystems to find a permanent solution. So the answer is yes. I think it's one of the things that we need to do together with other tools that are being tested.
Yeah, I'll add also doing coral restoration with resilient corals. So that's something that I have been doing in Hawaii. So collecting the corals, it's something that's time consuming, but collecting the corals, bringing those fragments to the lab and testing how far those corals can actually survive, right? Doing long experiments with these corals, exposing these corals to high stress over longer periods of time, and then deploying again these resilient corals on the reef. So doing coral restoration of the corals that already are showing to be more resilient to heat stress.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Yeah.
Hi, I am Munab. I'm from Global Kids as a youth leader. And my question to you guys was, as I've been listening, I've seen that all four of you have mentioned how youth voice is really important in all over the places, not only in, coral. And my question was that if it's so important, how do you think we can not only let other students in, let's say, high schools know that this is not only a thing, but it's also possible for you to get more information on this, as not a lot of people know about what it really is, So, yeah.
Just to clarify, by it, do you mean COP or like the scientific issues?
All of it. Yeah.
All of the above.
Yeah.
Does anyone want to start that?
I don't know if you're talking about like the policy or the core or the science, both the science. I think it's important to do community engagement. So like scientists cannot just be doing the science for themselves. Like in Hawaii, we really try to work with the community. So it's important for scientists to not just be working at the university. Like we should have internships, we should have mentorship programs. Also, as part of the coral restoration project that I mentioned, we do kind of community days where we invite the community to come and actually be involved in the coral restoration project as a way for them to learn what we are doing, but also feel empowered. They are part of the project. They are doing the coral restoration themselves. So it's a way for them to kind of learn about the science that's been done and also be part of it. Is that kind of, yes? The question.
And some specific programs as well. We also have the internships. We have kids from the school that come to the lab and have a kind of a small project, or groups of kids that come and we explain what's happening, why this is important in the science. But also when we go to the schools and we go to these events where we have a concentration of kids or a concentration of young people that can actually be the catalyzer, they can amplify the message and reach out to their parents and their families. And of course, because they will inherit all of the problems and all of the things that will come out of it. So I think it's extremely important that they are aware of what's happening and that they are part of the discussion and also the pressure for us to make a change.
I could also add one strategy, I've used before when giving like public awareness. You sort of bridge the gap between the science. So some people, they don't have a science background, so maybe they don't understand the different jargon and so forth. So you sort of create a better storytelling where they could better understand the marine ecosystem and so forth.
I love all of that. I think just to add, that's a really good question and like kind of the core of the work to be done on youth engagement, right? I think a theme that I heard was going into community and meeting people where they are. I think that's something that we're trying to do better at as an agency at NOAA, physically going into communities and attending conferences that are focused on students of color, going to minority serving institutions and doing presentations, kind of actively going into the spaces where we know we haven't done a good job of reaching out in the past. So I think that's part of it. I think starting early is another big part of things. Again, historically, NOAA has been focused on undergraduate and graduate fellowships. We're a science agency first and foremost, so we often think of university as, you know, the hubs of science. It's really important to start at the high school level to get folks even aware of the science that's happening and the different fields of study that one can go into to address these problems, because we do need an all hands on deck approach, all skills, all people. And making sure that we have accessible opportunities as well, making sure that we are paying people for internships, paying people for their time and expertise. I will always get up on a soapbox about that whenever I can. And Mariana, it looks like you have something to add too.
Yeah, because you said, like, yeah, we have been mentioning how important it is to have young people here, right? So you need both an understanding of the science, but also an understanding of the policy, right? Like, you're here, you're an activist, you're here to advocate for agenda that you're advocating for. So yeah, we're talking about the science. So there are internships, there are movies, for example, Coral, that is the Chasing Coral. It's a movie that's on Netflix. It kind of explains, it's like a very visually pleasing, so it's very nice to show friends, to show family that don't know about corals. And I feel like people only care about what they know. So like having, not just talking, but like showing, right? Like, so that people actually can feel, can see it. But also, like, so we talk about the science. How can they learn more about the science? But then the policy. There are so many different amazing programs right now. There are amazing leaders, some here in the room, like involved in marine advocacy. So reaching out to these groups that is like care about climate. Haley, I think she's probably here. We have Peace Boat US. There are so many different programs that are training young people interested in policy. So I encourage you guys to search for that.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. Other way. Oh, two more. Okay. I want to give everyone 30 seconds to wrap up, too. Try one more time.
Hello. Okay. Aloha mai kako. My name is Conrad. I come from the island of Oahu. We're talking a lot about the need for youth, and from all kinds of places, all walks of life. And something you just brought up too is making sure that young people are paid for their work and contributions as well. As a young person, especially in Hawaii, a lot of the talks among my peers who've been doing this work for much longer than me is it's really hard to be able to do this work, to be able to pay for rent, to be able to look for a future. That's one of the kind of things I was talking with friends who are doing amazing work, and it's because we're passionate, it's because we care, because it's our future, it's our responsibility. But I guess it's tough. So I think as I see my friends get older and older, there's people who have to go out of the way, and now it's becoming a side thing. So what words of encouragement do you have for young people who are either getting into this field or who are pushing hard but struggling to make ends meet, working 2-3 jobs to be able to keep doing their internships, to be able to keep studying their work and their research in coral reefs, in climate? So yeah, what words of encouragement do you have for us young people? Mahalo.
It's that. For me, learning about the science and learning about our environment and witness it being degraded, I would say don't lose hope. It's really heartbreaking, especially when you're a young, vibrant, passionate youth. Don't lose hope. Just continue going. It would be worth it in the end.
And maybe use the challenges as opportunities, because there are so many things that can be done that are not yet developed. So it may be also an opportunity for innovation to be deployed and developed and become a business. So I think it's important to keep in mind that fighting climate change and protecting these environments can also be profitable. And I think this is what's going to do the trick when we start understanding that all of these changes and the sustainable way may be also a profitable way. And with that, we can actually bring interest and awareness in a way that it's doable.
I'll add one more thing there. I started doing this work when I was 14, growing up in Indiana in a landlocked state. So corals are new to me. Ocean stuff is new to me. But what was really helpful to me was finding adult allies who really get it and will lend you some of their power along the way to help you continue moving forward. Whether that is your mayor who's willing to give you a seat at the table, a teacher, another adult ally, who already has some amount of clout or resources and can lend you some of that. That's really helpful. It at least has been really helpful for me in my journey and helping me find those paid opportunities. I think continue putting the pressure on folks to pay young people for their expertise, for their time presenting and everything along those lines, and find those allies in positions of power to help you out too.
So yeah, it's hard, but don't give up. I think if we cannot give up. There's no other choice. If we leave, then we lose the seat of the table. So don't give up. But I also say, like, try to find ways to show your value to whatever group you're trying to work with. And once they realize the value, maybe there's a path for like being paid or even like just recognizing and finding more opportunities. But I think we bring so much to the table, but you have to show them. So for example, social media or your influencer, speaking events, like offering to do multiple things for the organization so that they actually see the value they're providing for them.
Hi, my name is Janet. I'm from Mozambique. I actually am volunteering for an organization for early career professionals. And I was wondering, I wanted to know from Renee, she's from the government, right? Sometimes we have like setbacks in relating ourselves with the government, especially we want to do like research on coral reefs and we need permissions and stuff, but there's this thing of bureaucracy and stuff. And I wanted to know, how do you ensure that this gap, this bridge is like shortened for the youth, for you guys to engage in the youth and ensure that they can develop their initiatives like research, for example?
Interesting question. Yeah. It's not easy, especially when the governments are involved. It would be maybe easier as an NGO, but as for me, you have to show them the importance and why it is beneficial to the government and all the interconnectivity between different sectors, forestry, fisheries, climate resilience. You just have to continue showing them how everything is interconnected and related. I hope I was able to answer you.
Amazing. Thank you all. I know we're at time. Do we have time for 10 seconds each? Final thought? Amazing.
Don't lose hope. I think this is, and innovate.
I would say we need to act now. The reefs are actually dying. I'm not telling you hearsay or DC. I actually witnessed it. And we need to act now to preserve our marine ecosystem. In fact, we need to protect the entire earth because it is degrading and we need to protect it.
I would say pass on the information. Talk to other people about what's happening to corals. Show them the movie. Show things on social media. Like, people don't care about what they don't know. So tell people about what's happening so they can actually care.
And just 1 second to add to that. Not only the corals are dying, but that they are dying super fast. So in some cases, amazing, pristine reefs, I've seen that happen last year. They died in 2-3 months, from amazing to dead. And I think this information is dramatic, but needs to be shared. And of course, that there is hope, but that we need to act now.
Yes. If people are the problem, people can be the solution too, right? So thank you. Please join me in thanking all of our amazing panelists. We're going to do a quick group photo with just the panelists. And then after our just the panelist group photo, we would love to invite any young people who want to come join us for another group photo. Would love to have you as well. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We loved having you join us at the U.S. Center. Please remember to return your headsets as you leave.